July 1944, Nazi Germany is collapsing on two fronts. Soviet armies have just wiped out 500,000 German troops in the east. Allied forces are pushing from the west, and Hitler's paranoia stalks every corridor of power. As the Reich unravels, a group of officers prepares a desperate plan to kill Hitler, seize control, and rewrite history. But just how close did they come, and why did everything unravel in a single afternoon? On the Eastern Front, June 1944 brought disaster on a scale the German army had never faced. Operation Valkyrie, launched by the Red Army, tore straight through Army Group Center. In less than 4 weeks, 4 entire German armies were surrounded and destroyed. Roughly 500,000 soldiers were lost, killed, wounded, or captured. The front collapsed so quickly that command was ripped from General Field Marshal Ernst Busch and handed to Walter Model, the man known as Hitler's fireman. But even Model could not plug the gap. Soviet tanks rolled to the very edge of pre-war Poland, and the Wehrmacht's battered survivors streamed west, abandoning thousands of vehicles and leaving behind a trail of wreckage. Meanwhile, in the west, the Allies had stormed ashore at Normandy on June 6, 1944. Within days, American, British, and Canadian troops carved out a beachhead that stretched over 160 kilometers. Allied bombers ruled the skies, pounding German positions and choking off supplies. Counterattacks failed, and German commanders watched as their last mobile reserves burned through dwindling fuel stocks. By late June, the Wehrmacht was fighting on the defensive everywhere, its forces stretched thin, its logistics in chaos. Inside Hitler's headquarters, the mood turned frantic. Situation maps showed the Reich shrinking from both sides. Reports of lost divisions and mass surrenders arrived daily. For many officers, the sense of impending defeat was no longer just a possibility, it was a certainty. The twin disasters on the front lines forced a reckoning among those who still had the power to act. The question was no longer whether Germany could win, but whether anything could be saved from the ruins. The collapse at the front lines sent shockwaves through the German command. In Berlin, Hitler's grip on power tightened, but trust in his generals evaporated. On the 27th of June, 1944, General Field Marshal Walter Model replaced Ernst Busch as commander of Army Group Center, a move that rattled the officer corps. Model's reputation as a ruthless troubleshooter offered no comfort to those who saw the war slipping beyond recovery. Across the upper ranks, dismissals and abrupt transfers became routine. Senior staff who questioned orders were replaced by men whose loyalty mattered more than their competence. The Wehrmacht's traditional command structure, already battered by defeat, now buckled under constant interference from above. Security measures grew harsher by the day. On the 25th of June, Hitler issued a decree that brought the SS deeper into the heart of the army. Himmler, already feared as the head of the SS and the Gestapo, gained direct authority over internal policing within the reserve army. This order allowed SS and police leaders to oversee investigations, monitor officers, and suppress any hint of dissent. For many in the general staff, it was a clear warning. The regime no longer trusted its own military. The lines between the army and the party's security organs blurred, and the threat of surveillance crept into every meeting and corridor. A sense of fear settled over the officer corps. Generals who once commanded armies now watched their every word, unsure whom to trust. The reserve army, once a sleepy backwater for wounded or aging officers, became a battleground for control between the Wehrmacht and the SS. In this climate of suspicion and purges, a handful of senior officers began to see the Nazi regime not just as a failed leadership, but as a danger to Germany's survival. Their conversations grew quieter, their plans more secretive. The seeds of resistance took root, hidden in the shadows of official orders and shifting command charts. Claus von Stauffenberg's transformation began with wounds that changed everything. In April 1943, near Medzuna, a strafing run left him with a shattered face, the loss of his left eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers on the other. The Gold Wound Badge, awarded on April 14th, marked more than bravery. It marked a break from the front lines and the start of a new kind of war. Staff rooms replaced trenches. Maps replaced mud. Doubt replaced certainty. His letters from this time reveal a mind in turmoil. Early notes spoke of duty, but by 1942, after witnessing atrocities in the East, he wrote that the crimes committed cannot be ignored. After his injuries, the tone hardened. He wrote, "After giving my blood, I am offered only a desk." By 1944, resolve replaced bitterness. He wrote that it was now time that something was done, even if we become traitors to conscience. Stauffenberg was not alone. Major General Henning von Treschow, already marked by failed attempts to kill Hitler, left a final note before his suicide that said the whole world will pass judgment on us. Colonel General Ludwig Beck, once chief of staff, believed Germany's only hope was to break from Hitler, whatever the cost. Their coalition, officers, thinkers, bureaucrats, disagreed on Germany's future, but they shared one conviction. They believed the regime threatened the country's soul. By mid-1944, security tightened. Only Stauffenberg, wounded but respected, could get close enough to Hitler. His resolve became the movement's driving force. General Friedrich Olbricht sat behind his desk, red pen in hand, as he worked through the dense language of Operation Valkyrie. The original orders, signed off by Hitler himself, authorized the reserve army to restore order in the event of civil unrest. But Olbricht's edits went further. He inserted new paragraphs and subtle phrases, expanding the reserve army's authority to include the arrest of SS and Nazi party officials, the occupation of government ministries, and the assumption of executive power in Berlin. Every change was crafted to look routine, a bureaucratic adjustment, not a coup manual. By July 15, 1944, the revised orders lay ready, signed and distributed to commanders across Germany's military districts. The legal facade was complete. This legal groundwork allowed Stauffenberg and his circle to present the coup as a matter of duty, not treason. When the time came, every troop movement and arrest could be justified by the text of Valkyrie. The orders even specified that the threat came from a treacherous clique within the party, giving cover for action against the regime's own security forces. The plan's logic depended on speed and clarity. Only one bomb would be used. Stauffenberg's injuries meant he could only arm a single device with his remaining 3 fingers. The explosive, about half a kilogram of PETN, was just enough to fit in a briefcase and still be handled by a man with limited dexterity. The hope was that one well-placed charge would be enough. Staff briefings rehearsed the order cascade. Once confirmation of Hitler's death arrived, reserve army units would move on SS barracks, radio stations, and ministries. The coup would unfold under the guise of legality, each step shielded by a paper trail. For Olbricht and the others, the pen had become their most dangerous weapon. At 12:42 p.m., a sudden flash and deafening roar tore through the cramped wooden hut at Wolfsschanze. The room, roughly 6 by 8 meters, became a maelstrom of splintered wood, flying glass, and choking dust. Seconds earlier, Stauffenberg's briefcase, packed with nearly half a kilogram of plastic explosive, had sat just a few feet from Hitler. But Colonel Heinz Brandt, searching for space at the crowded table, had nudged the case behind a thick oak table leg. That simple gesture changed everything. The oak support absorbed the worst of the blast, shielding Hitler from the direct shockwave. Officers standing on the far side of the table, exposed to the full force, were not so lucky. 4 men died from the explosion or its aftermath. They were General Schmundt, Colonel Brandt himself, General Korten, and stenographer Berger. Others staggered from the wreckage, ears ringing, uniforms shredded. Hitler survived with burst eardrums, torn trousers, and minor burns. The briefing hut, its flimsy walls and windows blown outward, looked as if a storm had passed through. In the confusion, the question echoed: who was still alive, and what had just happened? Teleprinter machines rattled out conflicting reports across Germany. At 13:05, a telegram from the Lair confirmed what Berlin feared most: Hitler was alive. The message arrived just minutes after reserve army orders had begun to mobilize. In Munich and Vienna, officers hesitated, unsure which version to believe. Some units moved to arrest SS leaders. Others stood down, waiting for clearer proof. In the Bendler block, confusion deepened into paralysis. General Fromm, desperate to save himself, switched sides as soon as he learned of Hitler's survival. He ordered the arrest of Stauffenberg and his closest allies, hoping to prove his loyalty to the regime. That night, in the courtyard, the firing squad assembled under floodlights. Stauffenberg faced death with steady resolve, speaking quietly before the shots rang out, saying, "Long live our sacred Germany." By morning, Ulbricht, Quernheim, and Beck were also dead. The reprisals did not stop there. Judge Roland Freisler's People's Court opened its doors for show trials, drawing on transcripts and letters as evidence of betrayal. In the weeks that followed, thousands were arrested, and the executions multiplied. The failed coup had not only failed to end the war, it had triggered a wave of terror that swept through the ranks of the resistance and far beyond. Acts of resistance inside totalitarian regimes rarely succeed. They expose the moral choices history demands. Today, authoritarianism still tests conscience across the globe. The courage shown in 1944 reminds us, even when failure seems certain, defiance shapes what it means to stand for something. Thanks for watching.